Does temptation lead to evil? If you were to ask Walt Disney's 1940 classic Pinocchio, the answer may be yes. In this film, the titular marionette puppet Pinocchio is awakened by a fairy and promised to be turned into a real boy if he remains good-hearted.
Prove yourself brave, truthful, and unselfish, and someday you will be a real boy.
Jiminy Cricket is assigned as his conscience to keep him on the straight and narrow path.
Take the straight and narrow path, and if you start to slide, give a little whistle.
Throughout the story, what hinders the naive Pinocchio to achieve this is temptation. Temptation to the excitement of being an actor. Temptation to all the unopposed festivities of Pleasure Island. Is this film telling us that temptation is the root of all evil, the innocent sprout that grows up to become something entirely else, something entirely worse? By looking at several of the characters Pinocchio meets on his journey, we could almost step by step lay out this descent to absolute evil, a ladder of evil. Cue dramatic sting or alternately a thunderstrike. Pinocchio himself represents the first step of this ladder, young and naive, benevolent and kind, yet still a ripe target for temptation. A boy who does not have the strength or will to resist the temptation put in front of him, who is easily persuaded by its benefits. Not being able to stir away from this path is a slippery slope further down the ladder. If Pinocchio were to fail this test, the next step would be similar to the character Lampwick. We almost saw this transformation in the film, but they transformed into donkeys instead. Lampwick represents this second step. Someone who no longer conducts himself in the same good-natured manner as Pinocchio. He displays reckless and unconcerned behavior towards others.
Come on, let's go in and poke somebody in the nose.
Why?
Just for the fun of it.
Is mean-spirited and selfish. He is someone who has fully given in to temptation. The goal of all his actions are only to please himself. He does, however, not actively victimize others to get ahead. These qualities are reserved for the forthcoming steps. These next 3 steps are occupied by the villainous scum Pinocchio encounters through the story. Honest John and Gideon scams people without considering their fates.
That shows you how low Honest John will stoop. Eh, Giddy?
They are actively victimizing people. At least their crimes are not as bad as Stromboli, who imprisons Pinocchio just to make money off of him. Here we have someone who would resort to kidnapping and murder for his own selfish gain.
You will make lots of money for me. And when you are growing too old, you will make good firewood.
Worst of them all, at the absolute bottom of this ladder of evil, is none other than Monstro the whale. No, I'm just kidding. It is of course the coachman.
They never come back as boys.
This fiend's crime is not committed in a heat of the moment like Stromboli. No, this man at an industrial level enslaves children by turning them into donkeys. Cold, calculative, planned. This man has configured the perfect plot to use others for his own gain without any slivers of empathy.
So you can talk.
Yes, sir. I want to go home to my mama.
Take him back. He can still talk.
In Pinocchio, he becomes the face of evil, the ultimate succumbing to temptation. But thinking about it, Geppetto sending Pinocchio to school on his first day of life is probably the evilest act in this film.
A little wooden boy. Now who a wooden boy?
As previously mentioned, Pinocchio must first prove to have these noble attributes before completing the transformation to a real boy. Brave, truthful, and unselfish. The film is telling us that these qualities are what would separate Pinocchio from the bad people previously mentioned. The Blue Fairy wants to make sure Pinocchio is just not another addition to them. If that were to become the case, he is no longer worthy of life. In a dark way, we could almost see the opposite of this play out in the story. The troublesome boys on Pleasure Islands who were turned into donkeys become sort of a reversed Pinocchio. Real boys who had their humanity taken from them. By the film never having these boys rescued, you could in a way read it as that they deserved their fate or that it was for the greater good. Lampwick and the others had all given in to temptation. They were lost causes, doomed to continue further down the ladder and eventually become evil, exploitative people like the villains of this movie. Yeah, that is a pretty dark and cynical take.
Yeah. It sure is.
Pinocchio, however, eventually succeeds in keeping himself on the straight and narrow path and is in the end rewarded for it.
What you crying for?
Because you're dead, Pinocchio.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are. Now lie down.
But Father, I'm alive, see? And I'm real.
Pinocchio's state as a marionette puppet is interesting in how most of the film consists of him getting manipulated by others. This is not only by the villains looking to exploit him, but also Jiminy Cricket as his conscience trying to guide him to make the right choices. To really prove himself worthy of life, Pinocchio must also prove he truly have no strings.
I got no strings to hold me down.
Bravery, truthfulness, and unselfishness cannot just be conducted because Jiminy Cricket told him so. No, he must figure it out on his own, reach his own conclusions, and then make those decisive choices. Pinocchio must prove that his individual choices reflects these values. Unlike the rest of the film, the third act is therefore completely driven by Pinocchio himself. By taking the initiative to save his father from Monstro, he proves that on his own accord, he will do the right thing. Deny temptation and achieve selflessness.
There are no stings on me.
Thanks for watching. Follow me on Twitter for information on upcoming videos. And subscribe for more of this kind of stuff. Hej då!
Very good. Very, very good. Well, you can't please everybody.